Buonasera a tutti. Good evening and welcome to the Italian Radio Hour. Io sono Viviana and I would like to welcome back our regular listeners and also welcome any new listeners. Also be sure to like us on Instagram and Facebook at the Italian Radio Hour and subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch up on any past video interviews. Vorrei dare il benvenuto ai nostri ascoltatori da tutto il mondo, grazie per essere con noi anche oggi mentre continuiamo il nostro viaggio per l'Italia e la cultura italiana. Today we will move to Australia to talk about the Italian diaspora and specifically the Calabrian experience to Northwest Victoria with Luci Callipari Marcuzzo, a multidisciplinary artist, matter research, arts educator, curator, and writer. And through her arts, she explores notions of belief, religion, spirituality, Italian culture, practices, and customs, the Italian immigrant experience, a woman's place in the traditional Italian Australian society and family. Ma prima, pubblicità. Parli italiano? Do you want to learn, improve, or master your Italian? Istituto Mondo Italiano can help. Located in the heart of Regent Square, Mondo Italiano offers small group classes and one-on-one private tutoring to help you learn Italian in no time. Visit us online at www.istitutomondoitaliano.org. Un caffè, per favore. My first cup of coffee sets the tone for my entire day, and I get my coffee at La Prima Espresso. La Prima has been brewing Pittsburgh's best coffee for nearly 35 years. Try any of their in-house roasted varieties of beans from all over the world at home, or come and enjoy an espresso or a cappuccino at any of their locations, where their friendly baristas and familiar faces will make you feel at home. Because a trip to La Prima is like a trip to Italy, only closer to home. Well, I'm very excited to have Luci with us, join us all the way from Australia. Buonasera, buongiorno, Luci. How are you today?
Bene, grazie. Thank you.
So it looks like I'm actually in a better position. It's what time is it? Your time?
It is just past. It's about 5:25 in the morning. So
maybe
I'm up early.
I might have to send you some of that wonderful La Prima espresso coffee.
Yes, definitely. I haven't had enough coffee yet.
This conversation. So, Luci, I've been following your work with great interest. It started actually when I came across the publication Embroidery, the Stories, Interpreting Women's Domestic Needlework from the Italian Diaspora, and then a series of events that were organized by the Italian American Museum of Los Angeles, the Calendar Institute, and so forth. And you seem to be a common thread, no pun intended, throughout some of the conversations that were going around. But before we're going to get into the juicy, so to speak, part of the conversation, which is your work as an artist and indeed interpreting also the role or imagining the role of yourself as almost like your own grandmother, I always try to establish a connection between our guests and Italy. So my understanding is that your grandmother, your father had already come to Australia from Calabria. Because you're talking about probably a small place in Calabria and a place in Australia that not too many people might be familiar with, could you geographically give us a little bit of an idea of the starting point and the finish, the landing point?
Yes. Okay. So my grandparents from both sides, so my paternal and maternal grandparents, immigrated to Australia from Calabria, Reggio Calabria. So two small towns. So my father's family were from a town called, well, it's now called Natile Superiore, and my mother's family immigrated from a place called Plati. Very close to the Aspromonte Mountains, in a valley, not too far away from the Ionian Sea. It's a beautiful, picturesque place, and there is a notable landmark nearby that overlooks all those towns in the valley. It's called Pietra Kappa, which is the largest monolith in Europe, which is pretty spectacular to see. So they immigrated from those small towns in the early 1950s to eventually another small-ish town at the time in Australia, in Victoria, which is the state here, called Mildura and the surrounding areas. And basically at the time in the 1950s, they were wanting a better life for their families. And like many immigrants that left Italy at the time, you know, and in the States, it was that the wave of immigration was before that. They ended up in Australia, you know, making a new life for themselves.
So I'd like to maybe dive in just in a few seconds to talk about I guess the Italian-Australian experience and the fact that, you know, it happens to all the communities of immigrants that settle in a new place or wanted to clinging on some traditions and values and cultures, thus creating kind of mini Italies in wherever. Well, that the sense that you got from maybe the stories of your family that was happening as well in where you're at?
Yeah, definitely. So how my parents or my grandparents came to be in this area where I am now, in the Mildura area, the Mildura region, was because of the chain migration scheme. So they had other townspeople that had arrived prior and then put the call out. So the chain migration was in Australia operated, as I understand it, did in the States as well, and Canada, where someone would sponsor an immigrant and basically vouch for them and come and call for them, and they would come to Australia on the proviso that when they came to Australia that they would be willing to work, you know, in regards to that. So when they came, they had those early immigrants had some support because there were other people from their towns, and subsequently formed these microcosms or these capsules of culture, as I like to call it. So they were still practicing the cultural practices that were happening that they had left. So they had set up these other settlements and townspeople, and where I am, in the eventually there would be Italian masses that were practiced here, a few Italian festivals and things like that. So the festi which they also imported from Italy.
A question about the language, because what we hear very commonly here in the US is that because of wanting to assimilate, the first thing that got lost, not the traditions, was the language, or at least the passing on to the children. They wanted to become Americanized. But some people, like today, I actually had a client who is from Calabria. She's second generation, and she speaks Calabrese. She speaks the Calabrese of about 70 years ago. And she's completely aware. So I was wondering, one, if the Italian language was lost, or if the dialect was preserved. Again, it is kind of Calabrian dialect of a while ago. I was wondering, what's your experience? What happened maybe with your family?
A very similar experience. So they brought their lingua madre to Australia and were speaking to each other in their dialects or their languages, the many different dialects of the Calabrese language. So from the towns, you know, for example, my father's town compared to my mother's town, the dialect is slightly different. So there are nuances in how they say things, but obviously they understand each other. So as far as the Calabreses that settled at that time, there was also a preservation of their language, which they practiced. So my grandparents' generation practiced. Obviously, my parents, because they were young. My mother was about 13 years old. My dad, when he came out, he was a bit he came out a couple of years before my mum. He was around 12, so they were all still speaking the dialect from where they had come. And that was an experience with a lot of the other Italians who settled in this area and in Australia. It's something that seems to be a common thread with the States. So when sort of fast forwarding, so that they were speaking their language here, but because their children, so myself, for example, so my mother was speaking, and then but because we were here in Australia and we were children, we had to go to school. We had to go to we had to speak English at school. So a lot of the language was lost. But now in the last, I don't know, probably, well, not lost, it wasn't practiced as much. It was still spoken in the home, but it wasn't really outside of the home. And at school in Australia, Italian at one stage was the most common language to be taught in schools.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, so for example, I went to school and I learned in secondary school, Italian as a language was a subject, but not those dialects or those languages from the town. The Calabrese language wasn't. Do you know what I mean? So then, so when Mum eventually, so my mother came out in 1954, and she hadn't returned back to her town until we went over in 2015, which is part of my research. So she went, we all went back, and people from my father's town, my mother's town, could not believe that my mother's accent and her lingua had stayed. She was still speaking as if she had left. So it was and it was I suppose like an old version of their
second time version of the dialect. That's exactly how my friend and client feels. That is the dialect of her mom when she came.
Yes.
So we're talking about a few decades back.
Yeah. So for me, when I went, my experience was that because I explained just earlier about the two different sort of dialects. So my dad's and my mum's. So then I had this combination of that plus the Italian that I had learnt at school and had been practicing. So I was kind of talking this mishmash, and somehow miraculously my cousins and cousins in Italy understood what I was saying. So that was fantastic. But yeah, certainly for my mother, they just could not believe how perfect and how unchanged her accent. There was no addition of English words when she was speaking. So that was something that was she thought was pretty awesome.
Now, when we talk about Calabria, we shouldn't forget it's part of the Magna Grecia. There is a huge richness in that. Can you tell us a little bit about it and what we might have inherited from that territory that obviously doesn't just include Calabria?
Yeah, so Magna Grecia was an amazing, now as a 2,000-year-old ancient culture. So and at the time, so that name was given by the Romans to the coastal area of southern Italy, which included the present-day Campania, Puglia, Basilicata, Calabria, and in Italy. So that quite a big chunk of southern Italy. And was extensively populated by Greek settlers. So there were settlers that Greek people that, for some reason or another, economically, it's believed, decided to move on and populate the southern Italian, those regions in southern Italy, and they brought with them quite an influence that cannot be denied, because the Greco-Roman influence in culture and artwork and all of those things was an incredible legacy to have left. But it's not a common thing. I think in Italy it is known, but not a common thing that people know outside of Italy, that actually
was the cradle, a lot of
it was really a really important place, and also that Calabria was kind of, and that southern Italy was, has a really strong Greek influence. Which there are some pockets of a dialect called Greco in a few places in Calabria and other in southern Italy. Yeah,
when I remember when I was in Calabria in Bova, which is a beautiful little town, you actually see the street signs in Greek first.
Yeah,
and then not that it's spoken in the streets, but you can find these little pockets of Greek culture there. Now, you mentioned that your mom hadn't returned to Italy until 2015. That's when also you studied. I don't know if that's when you started your journey towards rediscovering, or maybe your rediscovering your Italianness had already played a huge role in your artistic career. But I was wondering if, I think you had also a little video. I don't know if you are able to play the images of you. I think you were somewhere in maybe in Aspromonte, or doing some sort of pilgrimage.
Yes.
So I was wondering if you can give us a little idea of what these journeys, so to speak, not just the trip to Italy, but what was the mission of going back to Italy and the work that you're doing these days?
It was on the wrong file. So I'll just.
Yes, it definitely was. Here we go. Yes. So
here we go. So here, so this is in 2015 when I was studying for my master's of visual arts by research. So you mentioned, so a few years before, I mean, I'd always been interested in going back to Italy. There was a strong pull to go back. So this video is showing me doing a pilgrimage in inverted commas to Bolsi, which is the sanctuary of Our Lady at Bolsi is a place that many pilgrims, especially from around the region where my grandparents were from, made. So they would leave by foot, and it was a few hours that they would, 6 hours that they would walk. So here I was, I'd always heard stories from my father and my grandparents about Bolsi and La Madonna, who had miraculous qualities. So I decided to while I was there to do this pilgrimage, but there was inclement weather. So we eventually made it there. And it was an amazing experience. Here I am, I'm dressed in the manner that the anziani, or the old people would wear, the long skirt, all in black. But my contemporary take with a red headscarf, that was kind of me kind of implanting myself. And I found I really found that this was a really emotional experience, because, as I said, my father passed away in 2002, and he would always speak about this. So when I was doing this pilgrimage into the church, I really felt he was there, present with me, a very strong presence. So that was a pretty amazing
almost
thing to do.
Almost like you represented the crossroad of who might have left now
Yes.
come back, or the new generation. So a lot of probably a lot of weight, so to speak, on your shoulders, whether as you said, you might have felt it because you felt also the presence of your father, but the significance of your pilgrimage in that case, on behalf of many others, kind of returning to the motherland.
So it's like, for me, it was like that. There's a term that's been coined called post memory, which Marianne Hirsch, who's a researcher, has described. So it's the relationship that the generation after, they feel and experience, they know stories, they remember stories, they feel those stories, they have those experiences from stories that have been passed down to them. So it's just kind of a really interesting, and I certainly felt that when I was doing this. So that's the end of that little video.
Tell us a little bit about again your work, because your grandmothers, and also I've seen pictures also of a dress and outfit of one of your grandmother that seems to be almost like a constant presence in some of your performances. But you're connecting with the kind of female roles, female figures in your family. But you also, I've seen you, as I said, the first image that I've seen of you, that where you had braids and you had a dress, you almost belong to a different time period. Was that intentional? Is that part of this journey where you're a version of your grandmothers? That's kind of almost the feel that I got. Can you tell us a little bit about it? And I believe you might have also a picture or so of the two grandmothers.
I do. So I'll just open that. So my practice, my arts practice. So I'll just bring up that image of my grandmothers. I'll go back to here. Sorry, it's a bit clunky. Here we go. And we'll just go to full screen again.
Yeah, we can just, we just
can keep that. No, what's happening? Sorry, I'm just gonna, my apologies there. I'm not sure what's happening there. Okay. It's still showing that other one.
Okay.
It's stuck.
Okay, no worries. Just tell us a little bit about your multidisciplinary approach to this kind of
I'll just do it like this. For some reason it wants to go back to the video. Why? Okay, so here we go. So there's a bit of text on the screen which I'll just get rid of. There we are. Here we go.
Oh,
so these images are of my grandmothers. So on the left is my maternal grandmother Domenica. And the dress that she is wearing, I often wear in my own performances. And on the right is my paternal grandmother Eleanor. So they've been a big influence. So through live art performance, so I create performances where I transform myself into an imagined version of my grandmother's, because of course I can't be my grandmother's. So this is another example. So these two images are from an endurance performance, a 4-hour performance that I did, and video installation called Galla Mia, which was a song that my grandparents used to sing while they were working. So on the left-hand side is me wearing the dress that my grandmother Domenica wore on her trip to Australia. So this dress was made especially for her trip and her embarkation and disembarkation from the ship. So and it's a beautiful red check, silk dress that was handmade by her dressmaker in Plati. And on the left, I'm wearing another dress in black that my also belonged to my grandmother Domenica. So the story of this performance is that I was singing the song, singing Calabrisella for, I don't know, 4 hours, I think I said before, and it transforms from happy to then sad. So there's a story. Well, there was a very tragic story. So in 1960s, my mother's brother Bruno was tragically, it was a tragic tractor accident, and he died. So I was kind of honouring him and my grandmother Domenica, who at this point in 2013 had passed away quite a few years before. So it was kind of like her story of the joy of being in a new place in Australia, but then the devastating loss of losing her son. So as part of this performance, it ended in silence. I might go to the next slide. No, they're already there. Oh, hang on, get this one. So here the process of sorry, you go, Viviana.
No, I was wondering because you know, some of the pictures I've seen you were with those beautiful braids around, and I was wondering how long is her hair, and it complements the look of, you know, I remember also my grandmother wearing her hair that way. So tell us a little bit about also your beautiful hair, which has a significance in this.
Yeah, so the video that's playing is actually the process of me transforming myself. So what I do in my performances is I transform myself into a version of my grandmother's. So there I am with the dress that I showed earlier, that my Nonna Domenica belonged to my Nonna Domenica, and I am braiding my hair. So my hair is very long, and I started growing my hair, I think, probably before 2015. So you can't sort of see at the moment, but it is still very long. And the process of me transforming myself. So I'm braiding my hair, which was the fashion that both my grandmothers would wear their hair, because it was a practical way for many immigrant women, not just Italian women, that kind of era. And so part of my methodology is like growing my hair, but also the attachment to my hair, literally, and the reason why it is that long was so that I could braid my hair and be authentic, and look like them, and also feel like them. So part of the transformation and the performances that I do is a way for me to reconnect with them, but also to give voice to my grandmothers, but to other women, other immigrant women whose voices weren't often heard. So doing this public display of transformation is really important.
You also continue to highlight women through some of the handmade work. We would assume those ladies were engaged in those years.
Yeah, so the slide that's on the screen now is a performance that I did over a week. I think it was a week or 2 weeks in the window of a gallery in Mildura, where I live nearby, near to Mildura, and this was called Tracciando fili del passato, or tracing threads of the past. And this particular iteration of that was sewing. So I was in the window. That's my mum's pedal sewing machine there, and I decided I was going to, and this is part of my Master of Visual Arts by Research, that I was going to create a wardrobe, an Imagine Immigrants wardrobe is what I ended up making. So I was there every day in the window, which was quite curious to people, passing by. And this is a video that was made by ABC Open Mildura. So I decided that I was going to use traditional modes of women's making, so women's work, inverted commas, sewing, embroidery, and crochet. So here I am doing the sewing, and by doing this, I was reclaiming the memories of the women and their intention. So in this particular part, so as I said, that's my mum's sewing machine. So it was practical. It was not just, so they kind of had to make their own clothes because it was too expensive to buy new ones as new immigrants. So they made all sorts of things, petticoats, underpants, what else? What else did I say I made? But, a whole outfit. So, mudanti, and a really important part of certainly my grandmother's clothing were aprons, or fardali, which is the dialect word, or grembiule, which is the Italian word. So there were quite a few things. So here, this is kind of like the beginning of my of exploring those things.
So maybe this was also obviously, sewing can be very, I don't want to say meditative, but a combination of maybe hopes, wishes, the real life, some of the unheard voices, because when we look at the Southern Italian times and roles, and who had voice and who didn't.
Yes.
This was their time, their opportunity, so to speak, to be heard. Now you are a woman, an artist of many talents. I believe there are also some pencil drawings that you started to do after this project, and it's very interesting because I would not be able to, I can read it, but I don't know if I will pronounce it correctly. But I've seen a beautiful piece of embroidery of the wolf, and I don't know if you can read and tell us what is behind this drawing project.
So it was really the Calabrian proverb drawings were a series of drawings that I did. So with the aim of me creating a new drawing every day. Well, that was the intention, so it was just really for me to go forward with my practice and to further explore these stories. So what I'm showing on the screen is a proverb, "A fame caccia il lupo do bosco," which is Calabrese for "hunger will bring the wolf out of the woods." So a lot of the drawings that I drew, so there was in excess of 40. So I ended up doing quite a few drawings, and I posted them online on social media. So it became quite, so a lot of them were just very quick sketches, and then some of them were, a bit more labored. This particular one, so the wolf, I became really intrigued with the wolf. This particular, I don't know what it is about it, but I love wolves now. And there are quite a few wolves around the areas where my grandparents are from, and the famous story of the she-wolf in Roman mythology as well. So anyway, so this particular drawing I have redrawn a number of times, and also, as you mentioned, it's been translated into embroidery as well. So from this point, I then kind of moved on into creating embroideries. And this is an image of myself and my son, because at the time, quite a few years ago, he's nearly 18 now, with referencing the biancheria items, or the glory box items, or trousseau, or corredor, that women were expected to create, from a young age. So my mother learnt embroidery from the age of 9. That was something that wasn't passed down to me, because that was something else that once Mum arrived in Australia with her father and her mother and her younger brother, her younger brother actually had the opportunity to go to school in Australia, but Mum the expectation was that they went out to work. So they were working at different properties, vineyards, farms all around the area. So that kind of the passing down from mother to daughter wasn't always my experience. So of course my mum taught me how to sew, but not necessarily how to embroider. So this is something that I was re-exploring, but also then decided, okay, I'm going to do these embroideries and translate a lot of the drawings that I created into embroidery, which is what I did. So there was a whole series of those that I did as well.
And then also, it doesn't have to be necessarily from mom and daughter. It can be from mom to son.
That's right. So Christian, my son, ended up embroidering a car, and then later on, so there was another project, which I'm not sure. Actually, I might have another slide of that. He was, that was his interest. So I wasn't going to make him do something that he wasn't interested in. So, which was quite
another thing that also you engaged in with these also embroidery performances is that, embroidery becomes part of your performance. And here we see beautiful pictures of your family, and but it looks like engaging the participants and hearing their stories enriches, so to speak, your also your material, because it's all part of the work. And it kind of that's my feeling by looking also at this one picture. So tell us a little bit about these experiences and where you have, I see Museo Italiano Cultural Center, that's still in Australia, correct? But I think you were in Rome as well, doing some live performances.
Yeah, so this particular one that's on the screen, so it's really important, the dialogue that so my performances are participatory, or at least, the intention to, so I don't make people participate, but especially the embroidery, tracing threads of the past embroidery live performances, people were really intrigued and were really happy to sit down and tell me their stories about their parents, their grandparents, their own experiences of learning embroidery. And it was really a really beautiful time. So here I was near at the entrance of Museo Italiano in Melbourne, who allowed me to performance, which was part of this other exhibition, Sailing into History, Displacement and Arrivals, which was curated by Lella Caridi, and my mother's immigration story, so which I wrote for her. So in this picture to the far left, you'll see that's my uncle Bruno, who I mentioned passed away, my grandfather Francesco, my nonna Domenica, and my mother Anna. So, and there I am standing next to that red check dress that I was wearing in a previous performance. So it all, ties together. And there are my nonna Domenica's shoes and her bag.
Do you ever tap on, has your mom have you ever done an oral history with your mom, or has she shared her own experiences, maybe during a performance of yours, or somehow contributed to the material?
So this exhibition at Museo Italiano, so mum shared her story, and I wrote that, and there was also someone who from her story museum who came along and captured mum's story as well. Wonderful. which was awesome. So mum will often tell me stories about her childhood, her parents and things, and also, so we have captured some of those stories together, which is pretty amazing. So you mentioned the performance in Rome. So this was a live performance as part of Beyond Borders Transnational Italy exhibition at the British School at Rome in 2016. And that was part of the Transnationalizing Modern Languages Conference or project, which was quite a larger project. So in this performance, I'm making an apron. I mentioned earlier that was an important part, certainly for my my grandmothers, and speaking to other friends who are Italian said the same thing, that their nonnas were always, wearing an apron, in and out of the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
So this apron was created from collected items from Italy and Australia. So a piece of my mother's embroidery. So this is where I kind of started beginning to co-create with my mum.
Mm-hmm.
But also some other items, like from my zia Palma had gifted me, because I was in Calabria just prior to going to Rome for this conference and performance. So I had some items, vintage fabric, but also I had some other, my cousins in Natili Nuovo had taught me how to crochet. So they, my cousins Maria Arminia and Maria Zavalia, Carmela, had shown me how they put, this particular technique of crocheting. So all of these things were then combined into this apron, which was really, was really amazing. And that the sewing machine that I'm sitting at was loaned to me by another artist, Sara Basta, who's based in Rome.
Okay, well, so a collaboration there. So do you tend, because I see you extremely serious while you're, is there any storytelling, or at that point you want to stay kind of in the zone and take the viewer into that zone, and almost maybe you're having internal dialogues? So I was wondering.
I was very nervous.
If there is a lot of talking there, or kind of just quietly, just kind of getting into
well, I was getting, so I was very, very nervous. So I think normally I'm very chatty and gregarious, happy to chat to people. So I was very nervous, and wasn't sure how people were going to interact with me, because I kind of, just prior to me doing this performance, there was a session in the conference. So I rushed out and sat down. So people had no idea what was happening, and they wandered in, and it was, it was really interesting to see the reaction from people that, what's happening here, that curiosity, but also I was just really concentrating on the task at hand to create. I had 20 minutes to create the piece that I wanted to create. So at the end of it, I did end up with the apron that was complete. But there were, so there were, as part of the apron, there's also 2 little embroideries of Italy and Australia, which I linked together with the red thread. So the red thread also has become an important part in my practice as well.
So talking about threads, Tracciando fili del passato, I believe there is another piece that you have. So there is both the collaboration with your mom, but here is also this collective experience of people coming and crocheting together, which I believe was one of the events that, unfortunately, because of not being geographically close enough to where you did the last one in the United States, I really was one of those events. I wish I could have flown and just be there. So tell us a little bit about, again, there is this experience that might be maybe repetitive at times, that might be, but it's collective, people are sharing stories. So tell us a little bit about how maybe even strangers are coming together, and all of a sudden maybe they're all sharing stories.
Yeah, so this project, so still tracing threads of the past, or Tracciando fili del passato, collective crochet, and there's a number of images that I have that I'll show. It's an in-person participatory, I can't even say it properly, collaborative performance, workshop and dialogue. So you touched on a few things there. So the image on the left, there are actually quite a few of my cousins and a family friend in that image. And we're having a lovely time. We're at Museo Italiano. And then on the right, this was part of my final honours year. So this exhibition, so collective crochet. So a number of people, many who I knew well, and some that I ended up knowing even better through this project. So that is the amazing thing about this. So I'm inviting people to come in and to crochet. Some people don't know how to crochet at all, so then I teach them. But what we're doing is just a simple chain stitch that and again, getting back the idea of the chain stitch, getting back to the chain migration scheme. So it's like an interpretation, a translation of that through the red thread, and people are happy to participate. So I've got another image here. This was from another workshop in Melbourne at the George Peyton Gallery, which was part of another project, the CARE project, that I was part of. So this is in an exhibition space. So quite a few amazing artists in this slide. And this one was actually from the States last year at the Italian American Museum of Los Angeles.
Exactly, that was indeed, I can see Mariana Gatto there as well, who does a fabulous job out there.
That was I mean, a few of the participants had left just left prior to this photo being taken, but this was amazing. So many different people, different cultures, who had just heard about this project in one way or another and decided that they would come along and participate. And it really was these events in Los Angeles and also at Stony Brook University and at Casa Belvedere were just amazing. So I'm sort of getting emotional just remembering them, because people were sharing stories. Powerful. There were strangers, you touched on that, there were strangers connecting and then making plans to meet up. So it was really amazing. So that was I really loved it. And these people are amazing. So I hope when I come back to the States that I will be able to meet with them again. It was really awesome. And Nina Donato in that and on the far right in this image in the back line, really great friends now. So that's really, it's really great. So one of those things that can be unexpected, but also strangers coming together and meeting each other and just sharing and
feeling almost
stories.
As if you always had known one another. And sometimes people might even find out that they might have come from a similar part of Italy, sometimes even from the same town. It's just amazing. We had just the other day another episode on this documentary. There was a man from a town in Calabria, and then someone in Pittsburgh said, "My grandfather is from the same town." Oh, wow. And so just without even knowing, I mean, I've known this person for quite some time, but I never really connected. It was from the same town. You have a beautiful picture, another piece of work. That's a collaboration, very special, because brings your mom and yourself together. Tell us a little bit about what belonged to her, so to speak, and what is your addition, and a little bit of the meaning of this piece.
So this is a piece of biancheria, or it's a white work on linens. This was originally a pillowcase that my mother embroidered for her wedding night. So she had a whole set, and I mentioned that young women. My mother was 9 when she started learning embroidery, and arrived in Australia, I think around. I think she was 13 by the time she got here. So I just find this incredible that this was created at her age, for the intention that it would then be, for her when she eventually got married, which kind of blows my mind sometimes. So this was a pillowcase which I have, which for many years being used, it was actually worn. So it's threadbare. There's a couple of spots where the fabric is actually coming away from itself because it has been so well used. And then mum, being so pragmatic and useful, finding use for other things, had unstitched it and was using it for, I don't know, for something else. So she'd actually unstitched the pillowcase. That's mum's beautiful embroidery at the bottom of that. And where I've gone back over and hand embroidered the words "Tracciando fili del passato," or tracing threads of the past. And this work, I kind of explain it in that the threads kind of strengthen our bond as mother and daughter, but also our link to Italy and Australia, because this was created prior to her immigration to Australia.
Have you done other projects with her or with your son that we had seen before, to continue to connect to the generations, the words?
Yeah, so then we have worked again co-creating. So this work was actually done for an exhibition called Parent and Child in Nathalia, which is a town in Victoria, a few hours away from where I live. And again, so the two top embroideries, Eredità and Vita, the main embroideries are my mother's. So that, again, they were created a number of years prior to me then embroidering the words Eredità, or heritage, and Vita, which is life. And then that little embroidery down the bottom of a basketball was created by my son Christian. Again, he loves basketball, or he did at the time. So again, incredible. So that was embroidery and watercolor, I think, we used in that.
Wonderful. And then you have another installation called Intrecciare that has a variety of different materials, and we still see the bigger piece in the middle, but we started to see this red thread that you said is becoming very important also in your work. So tell us a little bit about the meaning of what we see.
Okay, so this installation was part of an exhibition that at Museo Italiano as part of the Diaspora Italiana conference in Melbourne. So that Diaspora Italiana is this conference series that has been held in Australia, the United States, Italy, and Argentina last year. So it's ongoing, but this was part of an exhibition that was curated called New Horizons. And in this work, there's my hair, so spun and plaited human hair. So I have also been collecting my hair as it's been growing. From my brush, I've been collecting hair, and I've been exploring, creating and plaiting it and creating it. So that's in there. But also, so there's the embroideries, Tracciando fili del passato, that we just saw earlier, and also other religious icons and souvenirs that have been either gifted to me or I inherited from my father and my grandparents, and some crochet that I attempted at doing. So some interesting shapes. So if we go to the next slide, there's a close up.
Oh yes, we can see.
Yeah, so you
pins,
can
a
see
lot of Madonnine, a lot of
Madonnine, and the safety pins. My mum would always have safety pins in her handbag. My nonna,
always on the vestaglia. If you were not on the gambiole, it was on the vestaglia. Yes,
that's right. That's right. Always prepared just in case something was falling apart. And that's kind of how I feel.
I guess it was their version of a hot glue gun or anything.
Yes. Keeping it together, keeping things together, because that was, the women were keeping the family together, but also these safety pins were kind of metaphorical in that way too, the metaphor of keeping everything together. But also some of the little medallions, Madonnini, were gifted to me from the States, Australia, and Italy. So they're super, really special. And you've a bit of a close-up of that, the hair plait, which kind of, again, people find it a bit, I'm not sure, they're not sure how to take it sometimes, because I don't know, because at one point it was very common for people to use their hair in artwork and things like that, but not and also a little embroidery, a chain stitch, crochet of my hair as well. So all chucked in there.
I think, I don't know if it's coming up, but we started to see, I like your, this is a combination of the wolves scenes that, as you said, you became very passionate about it. I see an airplane, maybe someone coming, going, separation.
The series of embroideries that I spoke about earlier were I was doing them in public again. So the tracing threads of the past embroideries, I'd done them in a number of places. So the right up in the top right hand corner is an embroidery of the moon that I created while I was at Museo Italiano, which a few slides earlier I had shown. So that was the outcome of that. And the wolves are there down the bottom. So out of the initial, a couple of initial drawings that I did, there was a very was almost like just a line drawing version of that in an embroidery, and then which then developed into a much more detailed embroidery of the wolf's head only. And a few of these are the Calabrian proverbs, the mouth, a bocca, and the spilt wine, which is all vino e la femmina ti fanno perdo testa, which means women and wine will make you lose your head, which interesting one. And there's one in the center, which is sacco vacante non sta già dritta, which is an empty sack will not hold. No,
great, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and the airplane was I created when I went. I created that after I came back from because in 2016 when I went over to Italy, I was on my own with my cousin, but I felt very guilty about leaving my family behind. And that embroidery is called lontananza. So I was a bit homesick, and I was feeling
homesick or
mother guilt
yeah.
all those things that Catholicism and society instills in some people. So that was a response to that. And down the bottom there is another co-created work with my mother called Ricordo I figli, which was created especially for the Italian Museum of Los Angeles. So this was part of the exhibition Italianità, Artists of the Italian Diaspora Reflect on History and Identity, which was shown at the IMLA in 2018, and that was the first time that I had shown there.
Yeah, we have a few minutes. I believe there is also a self-portrait. Completed also with very interesting pigments. So first, congratulations, beautiful. And we can recognize the dress again that you showed us before, belonging to your grandmother. How did you get the colorings?
Okay, so I was experimenting with homemade pigments. So though they're in that, so in the body of the dress, so it's embroidered. So I've hand embroidered this image of myself with thread, but also the addition of coffee, tea, I think mainly coffee and tea, and maybe some beetroot or raspberry for the lips and for the colouring in the face. So it was just an exploration of using domestic pigments that you commonly find in your fridge, your freezer, your cupboard. I've done a couple of workshops doing that. So just reaching for something that you don't necessarily always have to have art materials to create art, but also this linking back to the domesticity, to the women's work and the expectation on women, I suppose, in and depicting it, as myself, but it's me, but it's my nonni. So when you see me, when there are images of me, the postcard on the right was created for International Women's Day a few years back. and that includes the names of my grandmothers and my great-grandmothers, Maria, Paola, Caterina, Fortunata, Domenica, Elena, and my mum Anna. So a little homage to them.
Absolutely.
And yeah, and this was included last year at Woven Lives Exploring Women's Needlework from the Italian Diaspora at the Italian American Museum of Los Angeles. And this is why I ended up in this, one of the reasons why I ended up in the States and did that workshop, which I showed earlier at the IMLA.
As if you are not busy enough, you also have created a beautiful group. It's called the Ascolta Women.
Yep.
Can you tell us? Can you tell us a little bit? So, what is the purpose of? Well, ascoltare means to listen. So I think maybe it has to do with listening to each other's stories or something. But you can
definitely. Yeah. So, Ascolta, we're a group of women writers. From the common thread amongst us is that we have some affiliation with Italy. We're either Italian Australian, Italian, or are Italian affiliated. So there are a number of us from Australia and also someone in London, Elise Valmorbida. So this was formed in 2020. Around the time of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we were all together at a forum called Ascolta, listening to unheard stories in Melbourne. And we're booked into a writing workshop the next day with Elise Valmorbida and Anna Maria Dell'Oso. And then Melbourne went into lockdown. So it was pretty crazy. So the forum that we were all at on the Friday night called Ascolta, I think I said that already, listening to women's untold stories. There were a number of, it was organised by Teresa Capetola, who's actually in that image there. So out of that, we went into lockdown and we were like, oh, you know, we've now created this bond with each other. How are we going to keep this momentum going? So from that time on, so from 2020, every 2 weeks, we have met online via Zoom and with the intention to write. So we, the session will start off with us sharing a bit about our lives, you know, what's happened in the past 2 weeks. And then we go into writing, sort of visual or a written prompt. We write for 10 minutes, and out of that come some writing, which then was then developed into 3 books now. But the images that I have on the screen now are just the 2.
And then so stories from La Tavola inside, and then beautiful short stories and photographs and you know, maybe a way of reflecting, coming together, expressing and yourself. And then there is a third book, I believe, is it about some mysticism, or maybe it's out.
It's out. It was launched on the 8th of March at COAS in Melbourne.
So to coincide with Women's Day?
Yes. So every year these books have been launched to coincide with International Women's Day, and the latest one is Stories from La Notte, which is again sort of delves into folklore, family stories, fantasy, you know, the binaries of women, you know, as mala femmine and the saint and all those things, the witch, la strega. There's a few stories in here about la streghe. Healers and all sorts. So it's been fantastic just creating these stories. So stories from the inside were from that time of lockdown and that we experienced. Stories from La Tavola explored our relationship with food, which is sometimes love-hate relationship that we have, and all the expectation as Italian women that we're all good cooks, which is not the case. And La Notte, which has been, it's just been amazing to work with these women.
Let me see if there is one more thing. Maybe La Donna Rossa might be part of yes, indeed.
So we'll just probably are. We've been talking a long time, which is fantastic. So La Donna Rossa, which are the works on this in this slide. was a project that because I mentioned we've created this amazing bond with Ascolta Women. I really wanted, when I went over to the States, I've mentioned earlier, I had the opportunity to travel over to the United States for the Woven Lives exhibition at IMLA, but also a panel discussion at Stony Brook University with Bia More, Loredana Polezzi, and Mary Jo Boner, and also the collective crochet at Gaza Belvedere. I really wanted to bring my Ascolta and of course my talk at Calandra, which was in New York, which was amazing to be there. I really wanted to bring my sorelle, my Ascolta sorelle with me. So I created this project called La Donna Rossa, which everyone was given a postcard sized piece of card, red thread, a sewing needle, a crochet needle, and some crochet yarn, cotton crochet red. So with the theme of La Donna Rossa, and whichever way that the women that wanted to interpret La Donna Rossa in whatever manifestation that may have been. So it was really interesting receiving these because, you know, I posted these out. I mailed these the kits. So I created a kit for everyone and mailed them out to everyone, and it was really interesting to see what came back to me. So it was amazing. You know, there was a few hearts, as you can see here. A story about La Donna Rossa in Italy, where Margherita Angelucci, who created that work, is also another word for menstruazione, for menstruation. So I was learning all these things, but also receiving these beautiful images. You know, there's the little strega up the top, my little caride. Yeah, so it was really, an awesome project to be part of. So these little postcards traveled with me to the States. They were shown at Stony Brook, and also in the on the screen when I was doing my presentations at the various places. And then they traveled back with me. And then at the launch of Stories from La Notte, this book, they were shown as part of the launch. So they sort of come full circle. So that was really lovely to have that journey. You know, they were almost like little, we were journeying together.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. I guess if you might stop sharing, we will go into our goodbyes. But before doing that, actually, you know, if people want to follow more of your work or would like to get hold of you, I think you had your contact details that we can definitely share, because again, even though the world is a small place, and it wouldn't surprise me if people listening to this episode might find out that they had relatives from the same town of your mother or your father and wanted to find out more about their experience of them and so forth. So I feel like wanted to call you Luci. And does anyone call you Luci, or you just Luci?
My cousins initially call me Luci, because my birth name is Luciana.
Okay.
Yeah, but there's a story. Anyway, story about that. So it's been anglicized to Lucy. So my name is Luciana Domenica, after my nonna Domenica. Yes, so yeah, but my cousins initially do call me Luci, which I think is beautiful, which is really lovely, because it means light. So I'm quite happy to be the light bringer. And one of the things that I'll just quickly touch on. So when I traveled over to the States, what was really amazing is that I got to meet a cousin who I had found online. So as you were saying, that link that someone might discover, and we had been in contact for a number of years, and I actually got to meet my cousin Linda and Joanne, his sister, and that was so amazing to meet them in person. It was really a highlight. So many highlights. It was amazing. So very grateful.
So unfortunately, our time together is up. Il Big Ben ha detto stop, and it's time for us to say arrivederci e alla prossima. We want to thank you for tuning in into the program. If you have any questions or comments, or if you have any topics you would like us to address, please contact us at theitalianradiohour@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. And remember, if you or any of your family and friends have missed a prior episode or would like to listen to this episode again, please visit our website at www.istitutomonditaliano.org and click on the Italian Radio Hour tab. You can also subscribe to the Italian Radio Hour on YouTube or where you catch your favorite podcasts. And I would like to thank our guest, Luci Callipari Marcuzzo. Our sponsor is Istituto Mondo Italiano, La Prima Espresso, and Alla Buona for the music. Until next time, alla prossima. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao. Grazie mille, Viviana. It's been amazing. It's been awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.